For decades, Putin demonstrated his disrespect to the international laws and agreements. He undermined democratic standards and our world order, and provoked conflicts in different parts of the world. His madness reached its peak in 2022, when he began his full-scale invasion of Ukraine. He planned a blitzkrieg. The blitzkrieg failed. But what made Putin believe that such operation is possible, that he can actually take Kyiv in 3 days? Many think it was years of isolation during COVID pandemics that made him believe in such a crazy and totally impossible idea that will definitely lead to the collapse of the Russian Federation itself. Putin has always been worried for his health and life, but during pandemics, he became totally isolated, spending months with just the closest fanatical friends. And his fears and insecurities grow larger, same as his insane ideas. And at this moment when we record the video, Putin's fears and fear of Putin still fuels the war. It's a big problem to be neighbors with the dying empire of Russia. When Ukraine wins and Russia collapses, I invite you to come and discover everything with your own eyes. But until then, I'm ready to be your YouTube guide to this part of the world and our turbulent history. Subscribe to Discover Ukraine and protect yourself better against Russian propaganda wars. If I had to name all of Putin's phobias, this would be a very long video. So let's name just a few. Putin is definitely afraid of the revolution and any changes. He is specifically terrified with young and promising democracies so close to the Russian borders, like Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova. Also, he is afraid of opposition or any political leaders that can substitute him, and a classical coup, so popular in Soviet and Russian histories. And Putin is desperate about his aging and weakness. We have a video on that, do check it. But all of these fears actually come into one: the fear of losing his power. People close to Putin report that he was deeply affected by Muammar Gaddafi's death. Gaddafi was killed by Libyan rebels, and images and videos of his capture and death circulated the internet. And they triggered lots of Putin's fears, and he kept discussing it everywhere, on public and in private. People who know very little about the history of Ukraine and Russia, about Putin, they often think about the negotiations and peace, because they think Putin also wants peace. In reality, he wants war. War helps him to stop protests, to keep hiding in bunkers from viruses, from his own population, and of course, from the Ukrainian armed forces. Putin wants you to be afraid of him. This is a classical behavior of a bully. But there is no reason. He can and will be defeated. Subscribe and I will explain to you how. Since March 2020, the beginning of the pandemics, Putin spent most of his time out of Moscow in isolation, surrounded by the closest friends and staff. What is important, all the members of his staff were not allowed any contact, even with the members of their family. They had to remain isolated with Putin. He conducted meetings only online, and when there was a need for some specific private conversation, people had to spend weeks, if not months, on quarantine. Ministers, governors, and other respected people in Russia had to spend weeks, sometimes months, closed in hotel rooms just for the chance to talk to Putin, and it was not guaranteed. Only one person, his close friend, criminal friend, billionaire Yuri Kovalchuk, spent all of the COVID time together with Putin. Many believe he used this moment to inspire Russian dictator to attack Ukraine and start the full-scale war. And all because Kovalchuk is a mystic, believing in the special mission of the Ruski Mir, and also because he wants Ukrainian money. Yuri Kovalchuk was actually the one who inherited all the wealth of the Ukrainian former President Yanukovych, put at power by Putin, who planned to annex Ukraine just as he did with Belarus. So Kovalchuk wanted access to the resources. And in 2022, when the world was slowly getting back to normal, Putin invaded Ukraine. Most importantly, he remained hidden somewhere among his bunkers, still keeping to the quarantine. And here is my favorite illustration of his madness, the so-called COVID tables. I'm sure many of you remember them when Putin spoke with respected leaders of the world like Scholz or, for example, President Macron. He sat at very, very, very long tables. And he kept sitting at similar, even longer and wider tables on the conversations with Minister Shoigu and other politicians. This is definitely not just a meme, this is a diagnosis. You know, when we first recorded the video about Putin's doubles, I felt it's a little bit insane. Not many people have doubles, but learning more about dictators and their lifestyle, I think it's quite likely. And here in Ukraine, we often joke, how do you identify where there is a real Putin or his double? When it is a real Putin, he sits at this really, really, really long table. And when it's a double, he can be closer to people. Since 2022, Putin avoids flying. Well, obvious he understands the skies won't bear him. And he mainly travels the railroad. Most importantly, he's always accompanied by an officer of the Special Security Forces who is responsible for collecting Putin's excrements. According to Paris Match investigation of 2017, Putin always travels with a bodyguard who is responsible for the collecting of his biomaterials and transporting them back to Mother Russia. Of course, all of that should go to Mother Russia. Most importantly, they do it to hide the information about the dictator's health and also to prevent the West from developing special, tailored for Putin bioweapons based on his excrements. Wars, pandemics, and old Soviet Cold War heritage allow Putin to hide in bunkers. That's his new hobby. And he has a lot of bunkers from Moscow to the Urals. Most importantly, he keeps building them like crazy. Of course, building roads or toilets is not a priority in Russia. Building bunkers and air defense systems around them is what they need. So we can say that Putin has old, Soviet, state bunkers and personal, modern, developed up to his likings. What a life! Actually, the depths of tunnels can reach 200 meters. He is coming closer and closer to hell. According to 2010 blueprints, the German build actually recreated a 3D model of one of Putin's bunkers in Gelendzhik. The thickness of its concrete walls reach 38 centimeters and the total living area is 650. Putin has a lot of bunkers in literally every corner of the Russian Federation. Near Mount Yamantau, also in Yekaterinburg, Tver, of course in Vladai, in Sochi, and many, 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 many more. Moscow is all with tunnels underneath it, connecting the institutions and various governmental buildings since the times of the Cold War. But right now, everything is renovated and supplied with the necessary for the dictator's survival things. Despite the fact that all of his shelters are equipped with radiation protections, various anti-chemical weapons filters, with specially compressed air and whatnot, Putin is afraid. And he left one of his favorite residences in Sochi. Before the start of the full-scale invasion and before the Ukrainian drone attacks, he could spend 200 days per year there, but not anymore. Since 2023, he stopped appearing in Sochi and actually part of his house was destroyed. None of Russian territory is that protected as Putin's boroughs, but he still has dronophobia, Ukrainian dronophobia. And what I love most, according to the Ukrainian intelligence officers, we know all of the locations of his bunkers. Actually, one of the quite popular call signs for Putin here in Ukraine is Bunker Grandpa. According to Putin's friends, if he has any, he has one weird habit. He never allows his doubles to enter his bunkers. Well, perhaps he's afraid that at one moment in history, it will be impossible for him to prove that he is the real Putin. Every time Putin, or even one of his doubles, has a need to travel, this visit is carefully prepared. Because as someone has beautifully asked in the comments, what happens if Putin's double is neutralized and people see it? What happens to the real Putin? Well, Russia is that delusional land and they will explain that Putin resurrected or something. But even when his doubles are traveling, the visit, the event, the meeting is very carefully designed because Putin is very much afraid of his population and he never comes in contact with real people. Actually, he travels with the group of actors that even Russian oppositional media know how to identify. These are actors who pretend to be shop assistants, teachers, or even people visiting an election office. Okay, with the help of actors and staged performances, Putin can protect himself from his own population, which is actually very tragic. But what about this close circle, like politicians, ministers, FSB agents? Let's not forget that Putin is an FSB agent himself, and he clearly knows how popular coups are in Russia. That is actually a very likely end for any Kremlin dictator. They don't know how to practice democracy or elections in Russia. That's why they simply execute that dictators when their time comes. And who knows? The clock is ticking. And just think about the front lines. Have you ever seen Putin close to the front lines? Compare that to the President Zelensky, who is very often hugging and shaking hands of our soldiers, and I'm definitely proud of that. I think that all of these phobias and fears that we have discussed before are minor. They live with Putin for decades, demonstrating his insecurities, just like the manipulations with his appearance. But there is one big, deadly fear, and it is Putin's fear of Ukraine, of our culture and language, our people, our schools, churches, our freedom. You cannot stop freedom. And that is why Ukraine's spirit and, of course, Ukrainian armed forces will turn Putin's fear into his downfall. Remember to subscribe to witness that all together. Thank you for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channel, and thus helping me film more of such videos. But most importantly, thank you for standing with Ukraine. Слава Україні!